It's been a day after India's retail inflation hit a 67-month low. Agencies like CRISIL and Moody's have maintained that India's GDP growth forecast to be at 6.5% through the next fiscal year. India also became the first ever country to recover all its market losses due to Trump tariffs. India's markets have rallied for 3 consecutive days, with Sensex crossing 77,000 mark. India's exports have also surged 5.5% in the recent year and are estimated at $820 billion. Meanwhile, Trump has hiked tariffs on China to a total of 245%, is what he has warned. He has said that the ball is now in China's court to make a deal with America. China has reacted and warned Trump against exerting pressure amidst concerns of India facing the impact of Trump's tariffs. What is the state of the economy and what can we expect next? Let's start our conversation. Joining me on the telecast is Sharat Kohli. Thank you. And the first question arises is that a record low when it comes to the inflation in the country at 3.34% for the month of March. What does it indicate?
Good evening, Megha. Good evening to my fellow economists and the NewsX viewers. Yes, I think 67 months low, this particular inflation, 3.34%. And a huge relief which has come on the food inflation front, because food inflation was the one which was really causing a headache to RBI. And it was a matter of concern for the whole country as such. Even the government was concerned, so was the Reserve Bank of India. And I think all out steps were being taken to try and see that food inflation comes under control. There was a lot of hoarding, there was black marketing, there were supply chain disruptions, which I'm glad they have been set right. And other parameters, when we talk of the economy, we talk of exports crossing $820 billion. Out of this, $440 billion plus is merchandise, which is very good. GST collections at almost 2 lakhs a month. Direct tax collections growing between 16 to 20% per annum. The purchase managers index not in a bad shape at all. Take any parameter for that matter. But there are, mega two opposite winds blowing in the country at this time. Whereas the domestic scenario looks very good. But when you look at the international scenario, there is complete uncertainty thanks to the Donald Tariff Trump, the Trump administration having declared trade war. And 5 business associations, Megha, in America have filed a writ in the court that after all, trade deficit which America has with the rest of the countries is not sinful. It is not possible to have a 0-0 with all the countries. It is normal for countries to have, trade surpluses and trade deficits. His approval rating has gone down. On economic front, President Trump's approval rating has gone down to 30% or 33%, sharply down from the time he was elected just a few months ago. His ratings on immigration may have still been over 50%, but his ratings on economic front, Megha, has gone down. As for our country, we have been negotiating. There's a BTA in the process, which is most likely to be converted to an FTA. So we are not at all in a bad position vis-a-vis tariff. But then we cannot forget the fact, Megha, that if 2 of the largest economies are thickly involved in a trade war, we cannot remain immune completely like the rest of the world. $50 trillion is the GDP when added together of America and China. So we cannot remain immune if they get into this severe 245% tariffs, which today were spoken of, basically means don't trade with us. Imagine if America and China stop trading with each other. What happens? There'll be dumping carried out by China. President Xi Jinping is already on a mission. He's going to Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. He's trying to bring them together to see where he's going to dump his goods now. And America, what are Americans going to do? They were so used to these Chinese goods. How are they going to manage? Either there's going to be inflation or there's going to be shortage of goods. Or, America is going to spell itself into recession. Can President Trump set up factories? The reason why he exempted mobile phones and laptops and computers is because he got a ground report that for God's sake, these factories cannot be set up overnight. As if the rest of the factories can be set up overnight. Even they are not going to be set up. I'm sure the reality of these announcements are gradually sinking into And I was the first one on your channel. I mean, I normally don't boast, I don't flaunt, but I was the first one on your channel when on 2nd April he made these announcements. I said he will have to soften his stand. And you wait and see, he will have to soften the stand further. But if China, America, they get into a trade war, I have a feeling, and I would hesitate to say that, Mega, that this can also lead to a geopolitical conflict because it is going to cause extreme economic distress between the two countries. Where this is heading towards, both the countries will have to sit down together. That's the only way this can be resolved. There is no other way, Mega.
Okay, all right. Ajay Dua, let's take a look at the India scenario. About the 67% inflation all-time low that India has witnessed. We see that there has been a rate cut that has been announced by the RBI twice in the first half of the year itself, talking about how Indian stocks have recovered after the Trump tariffs that had been imposed. India has been the only economy that has recovered as fast as it has. How are we able to revive and rebound amidst economic uncertainty that has hit hard countries across the globe? China particularly, Malaysia, Vietnam, all of them have been heavily impacted.
Thank you, Megha. We're talking very briefly about inflation. Yes, as has been pointed out already, it's the food prices which have come down, and food in our CPI does form a fairly large chunk, both particularly at the lower end of the pyramid, and that means about 40% of the people in India do have food as a major constituent of their expenditure, and that's good. Let's hope that the Kharif crop, which is almost ready for harvesting, Baisakhi is over a couple of days ago, that it does turn out to be good, and unlike in the past, the crop will be a little more diversified, more pulses. We would have more of horticulture products. We will have more of vegetables as well. As of now, things look on that. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. You never know when the weather can change. But prediction of IMD is that it could be early monsoon, which again means good for agriculture and good for food price. I am very sanguine about that. Second issue is, you talked about Indian stock market bouncing back. Yes, it has done well. Very few countries in the world have experienced that. But for that, I think we have to thank President Trump, whether we like it or not. The counter tariffs or the reciprocal tariffs imposed on India are relatively less than on other countries with whom we trade, be it China. China, as we all talked about, 200 odd percent duty being talked about. Vietnam, a satellite, so to say, economy, not independent country altogether. And I like it. I was recently there. But the fact is that there is a fair amount of Chinese investment, and there is a fair amount of trade between Vietnam and China. But relative rates applied to them vis-a-vis India kind of bode well for India. That is why the stock market reacted positively very quickly, though there is a respite of 90 days. Thinking that it does show what might be the future, whether it is by way of BTA getting signed by September or October, when President Trump is likely to be in India for the Quad Summit meeting, or even a little earlier. During the 90 days itself, some signatures may be done on bilateral. That's again a positive one for us. The third one, which you've talked about, is I think equally important for us, that the rate cuts. Yes, The previous governor wasn't kind of listening to the government's messages to him. Shanti, Shashikanta Das, a friend of mine who's worked earlier, we worked together, etc. But the present one is very clearly indicated. Sri Malhotra has said 25% cut within a few days of his coming, and within 2 months, in the next review, another 25. So it is softening of the. This will help inflation. This should help more investment to take place, both particularly by the private sector and the small. Having said all these positive things, I would still keep my fingers crossed.
Okay.
The flip-flops of President Trump. See, yesterday, 2 days ago, he exempted phones, chips, as well as certain other electronic items. Now he's talking of imposing high duties, including he's ordered an internal inquiry saying how was he misled by his own people in the United States who helped him take that decision. So there's an investigation taking place on that.
Okay.
Second, I'll just end by saying I fear that there could be also a reversal of roles. Today, if we do not play ball, if we were to act, today we have acted discreetly, but if we were to join China in getting a greater trade, or someone else whom President Trump doesn't like, you might have penalties visiting you as well. And that means all that we have talked about, favorable trade, favorable inflation, and favorable foreign trade could reduce its impact, if not come to a naught.
Okay. All right. The chances of that are nil, as we can see the scenario between India and United States of America. There have been trade representative level talks that have taken place. There is likelihood of the Vice President J.D. Vance, who will be arriving in India as soon as next week. So there are going to be, an anticipation of big announcements with regards to a trade deal, a bilateral trade agreement that India and US have been pushing for the past few weeks and months, ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi also visited and met President Donald Trump. I'm going to come to Mitali over here and talking about how it is a silver lining for India amidst the trade war that is taking place between US and China, because 24 hours ago there has been a revelation that has been made that a record number of iPhones manufactured in India were imported by Apple right before the Trump tariffs were brought to force. There is also a Wall Street Journal report that says that the Trump trade officials are going to be negotiating with the 70 countries to disallow Chinese goods to be shipped from their territories into America. Do you think supply chains are going to look favorable in India's position, in India's favor here on, when it comes to building more trade ties, bigger, stronger trade ties between India and US, and also the fact that China has been visiting and meeting their Vietnamese leader, and now he's in Malaysia, and tomorrow he's going to be in Cambodia signing those agreements and deals. Which way are these Southeast Asian countries going to sway is going to be paramount in how the American economy is going to react.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks a lot for bringing me into the conversation. I think there are a couple of very pointed, questions that you've raised, and I'd like to go through them. The first thing is that, the North Star that Prime Minister Modi has set for us. And yesterday you would have noticed that the terms of reference have been signed between the Indian authorities and the US authorities on actually negotiating a trade agreement. And India is amongst the first countries to to go ahead and sign that terms of reference in order to negotiate the trade agreement, and that puts us far ahead of other countries in terms of aligning our supply chains and supply lines clearly with the US side, the way Vietnam has done with the Chinese side, as you were describing. I do expect that India will definitely. I mean, in terms of doing business, there is, if we have to really choose, then obviously we have to choose the US side, because the Indian economy is already well integrated with the US economy. 75% of our IT exports actually go to the US or to US denominated companies, and that's one of our major sectors when it comes to employment, and also one of the major strengths for India when we are moving forward. When we are moving and creating more and more businesses in the AI era. You would have also noticed that today President Trump has announced a 245% tariff on China. On top of that, Nvidia, which is one of the biggest chip makers in the world, has actually been stopped from exporting chips to China in a soft way. And this means that President Trump is essentially saying that the AI revolution and the AI work that is happening in the US should stay within the US, and also should stay within companies, and technologies should be shared only with those countries which are negotiating this trade agreement. So I really hope that India will get a piece of that pie and will be able to be a partner with the US when it comes to artificial intelligence and technology, because that is very critical for the continued growth of our IT industry. The third aspect, which is very critical, is you mentioned about Southeast Asian countries, which way are they going to go? And definitely we are already seeing some of the Southeast Asian countries will align more closely with China. Some of them, like Singapore, for example, is a very interesting case, because Singapore is very clearly aligned with the US, particularly in their financial services trade, but because they don't have much goods trade. So the countries where you see a lot more goods trade is taking place in Southeast Asia, I do expect a closer alignment with China. However, the ones where services are dominating, especially in services, I expect a closer alignment to occur with the US. But for India, really, the real question is, how do we protect our agriculture industry? Because that is one area where the US might ask us to open up. And that's really one area where, through continued innovation and through more and more technology and investment, we have to open it up maybe a little bit, but at the same time, ensure that our farmers are protected. And finally, I would say that, when we're talking about the electronics industry, when we're talking about the semiconductor industry, these two industries offer a very, very big opportunity to India. Like you mentioned about mobile phones, if we are able to navigate and we are able to get this trade agreement in place, then the continued export of mobile phones or other electronics can happen from India to the US under the terms of reference and under the framework agreements that we would sign. And of course, the US realizes, like Sharadji rightly said, that you can't actually bring factories overnight into the US for manufacturing. But when you have a strong manufacturing base in a country like India, and the China plus one strategy was always afoot, what has happened now is that China plus one strategy is now on steroids, right? Because we're sort of saying we don't want to deal with China anymore. That's the message coming from the US.
Yeah. Also, feelers being sent out, Akash Jindal, from China to India. Yesterday, the Chinese ambassador to India came out and said that I think from 85,000 of the visas that have been processed for Indian nationals to come and live and work and travel to China. And the term that has been used is very affirmative, going about saying we are inviting our Indian friends to come and visit China and work in China and build business in China through those visas that have been processed. Chinese are also wanting to increase their investments within the country. They want to do more trade with India. Which way is India going to go?
Well, Megha, it's very nice that Chinese are using the words "we want Indian friends." I'm happy that they are still not using the words Indian brothers, because they have been using that Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai and doing with us what they should have not done. But I think it's good for India to bargain things with US. So it gives the India leeway to bargain things, because the way China wants to come closer to India, the way they want to have a, I mean, love affair with us, short term, long term, I don't know what they want. But yes, with all the offers which China is giving us, the way they are talking about visas, the way they are talking about Indo-China friendship, business increasing, I think that definitely gives India a strong point, a strong basis for demonstrating US that yes, we want to do business with us, but there are options. China is coming close to us. So that gives us a strength of bargaining things with Donald Trump and his administration. So I think if China is sending us offers, it's nice. We should just keep on listening to the offers. But I think US definitely is going to be a better trading partner for India. Though let me inform your viewers that for many months it was not US but China who has been our biggest trading partner. People in India have a perception that it's US who has always been India's biggest trading partner. For many months, China has been our biggest trading partner. So I think let them keep on sending offers. Let us keep on receiving and listening to their offers. But beyond listening, I don't think we should do much with them. We shouldn't forget what they tried to do 2 to 3 years ago on our borders. Of course, our bravehearts, they replied them very well. We should never forget that the way they have been helping Pakistan Pakistan has been doing terrorism in India, and China has been openly supporting them in all their activities. So we shouldn't forget any of these things, and we shouldn't forget China. Right from 1961, 62, we shouldn't forget what China is. So I think we'll be able to bargain nice deal because, now if you try to see what Donald Trump has been saying, he has been tough on those people who have tried to retaliate, but those people who have tried to negotiate, he has been soft on them, and particularly the chemistry which Narendra Modi Sahab, our Prime Minister, shares with Donald Trump is such that I am sure my organization, akashindal.in, is sure that we'll be able to negotiate a deal with them. Even the day when he had reciprocal tariffs for India, he said, Prime Minister Modi is a great friend of mine. So I think it's good for India to negotiate things with US. As far as Indian economy is concerned, I think we are performing excellently well. I'll give you some numbers. Now, after US levied tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico, in the month which was after that, March 2025, our GST collection has been 1.96 lakh crore. February 2025, our GST collection has been 1.83 lakh crore. Both have been records. Income tax collection, let me give you data. 16th March 2025, there's a growth of more than 16%. This is the date when we got the data. So this clearly shows that yes, we are buying more, we are consuming more, plus we are earning more because simply people who pay income tax higher only if the incomes are higher.
Okay.
And now there's this inflation reducing, CPI successively. Last month 3.61%, now 3.34%. I think it gives us great opportunity for RBI Monetary Policy Committee to further cut rates
absolutely.
and boost
Absolutely,
consumption.
it is, and also a potential for India to become a manufacturing hub, which we have been hoping and dreaming and aspiring, but still not have been able to reach that platform as compared to China and United States of America and several other developed nations. On that note, I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views.